Today, I'm truly delighted to welcome someone very special to this conversation. Someone who has been part of the Avishkaar journey from its earliest days. He was one of our very first students, and even back then, it was very clear that he was destined to do remarkable things. Over the years, he's grown into a true autodidact, a self taught powerhouse who wears many hats with ease. While design remains at the heart of his work, his curiosity and drive have taken him far beyond that world. He codes, he builds, he markets, he strategizes, and he brings a rare creative energy to everything he touches. He is also a Guinness World Record holder, which gives you a sense of the scale of his ambition and his commitment to pushing boundaries. But beyond all the accolades and accomplishments, he is also a close friend, someone I've had the privilege to watch evolve, challenge conventions, and inspire others through his relentless pursuit of learning and creation. Please join me in welcoming Nitish Chopra as we dive into an exciting discussion on the future of education. Nitish, it is an absolute honor and privilege to have you here. And let me start off with the first question for this particular podcast, the future of education. The question is mostly relating to you. I've seen you grow up. I have seen what kind of diverse interests you have pursued. But rather than I talking about you, why don't you share your life journey so far?
Thanks for having me here. And it's also interesting to be here because I've grown with you. You've been a teacher first, then a friend, then also a boss, and now just a big mix of everything. So extremely happy to be here. About my journey, yes. It's quite interesting. I think the way I kind of share my journey with anyone, in interviews or whatever, in a job interview as well, perhaps, or on date as well, is I start by talking about the fact that I started learning robotics and coding at the age of 10 with Avishkaar, or Bulo, or building blocks as it was called back then. And that's kind of been my core interest growing up, just being someone who would really enjoy robotics and coding, and that was it. And in fact, if anyone would look at me with a very limited focus, they would say that this boy would grow up to be an engineer. But fortunately, I never had any kind of pressures from family to pursue any road well trod, so to speak. And I was always, I had the liberty to do anything and everything that I liked. So by grade 10, I think in my head, I was already a good enough programmer and coder, and that kind of stopped exciting me a lot. And at a certain point, I had become extremely enamored with storytelling and animated movies, 3D animated movie like DreamWorks and Pixar and all of the sorts. And so at that point, I decided I'll go ahead and do an undergrad in animation. And that's kind of what I started my undergrad journey in, which kind of threw me into a design college. And little did I know, what design was back then. But fortunately, I was in a space that spoke a lot about design thinking and design in general, as opposed to animation specifically.
Right.
So after, I think, doing 1 or 2 years of animation in that school, I kind of realized, even the animation per se is not my cup of tea, but I think the entire framework of design thinking and the design process really kind of helped me also bring back my love of coding, of technology, and then helped me give another interesting perspective of design to look at solutions.
Right.
And that's kind of how I then went on to finish my undergrad. I switched my majors from animation to UI UX, and I finished my undergrad in UI UX design.
If I could just, can you just tell what did you do in your undergraduate and what did you do in your post-graduation? Which college did you go to?
So this was Srishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology in Bangalore. That's where I pursued my undergrad from. And my master's I've just finished last year from the University of the Arts, London.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And that again, in fact, was an interesting course. It was an MSc in creative computing.
Fantastic.
Because by that point, I think I was very clear that, technology is an area of interest, design is an area of interest, and I needed a master's that kind of allowed me to bring both these worlds together. So that's been a bit of that, but I think one of the pieces that did not quite get to is between my undergrad and my master's. I was working with Avishkaar itself for 3-4 years, and there, in fact, I also got, while I started my journey as a designer, I got to evolve to a product manager, which also helped me, get a good sense of the marketing and the business aspects of things. So in some ways, I think my journey has been, pretty much bits and pieces of everything: technology, marketing, business, design, and that's kind of the way I operate as well. It is a solution oriented approach, but then what kind of skills are needed to get to the solution, I've always been flexible about it.
Right.
So that's that.
And you did not. You started your career with Honeywell, right?
That's
Is that
right,
correct?
yeah.
You're with Honeywell, and now what are you pursuing right now? What are you doing right now?
So I think right out of my undergrad, I just graduated as a UI UX designer. The idea was to get a job somewhere, and I worked with Honeywell for a year as a UI UX designer,
Right.
designing software for their building management HVAC solutions, which was a great experience. I got to understand how big organizations work. Right now, I am leading design at an AI startup. We do a bit of everything, to be honest.
So if I have to put it, so basically you did your schooling in Delhi, then you pursued your undergraduate in design from Bangalore for 3 years. Was it a 3-year course or a 4-year course?
It was a 4-year course, yeah.
4-year course. Then you worked for a year with Honeywell. Then you worked for 3 years with Avishkaar. And then you did your post-graduation
In London.
And that was a 2-year course or a 1-year course?
That was a 1-year course, yeah.
1-year course. And then now you are a director of design at an AI startup.
That's right.
Right? Fantastic. AI startup. AI, I think it's probably, I have not seen a word used more in last decade or so than AI. Everything that you do in this, the world of technology right now is AI. It's like, it's like people saying anything, they can say anything, and then they also say, okay, by the way, this is our AI strategy, this is what we do at AI. While I've recently started using AI chatbots for my own personal work, but I've been a late starter in this domain in that sense as a user, not as a producer. As a user, I've been a late starter. So why don't you walk us through when somebody says it's an AI startup? What exactly, what your role is here? What do you do? What is the AI startup? What is the essentially AI product that you're trying to create? And if it's okay with you, if you could mention the name of the organization also.
Right. So yeah, the name of our company is Orzacen.
Very interesting name. What does it mean?
So yeah, interestingly, I think all our founders they come from a tech background. They've I can almost call them nerds, if so to speak. They
I
were
hope
coders.
they don't see this podcast, but
That's all right. I think that they wouldn't. I hope they don't mind. So Orzacen were actually comes from a BBC show, 80s or 90s BBC show called Blake 7, which had 2 robots. It was a sci-fi show, and one of them was called Orac, the other one was called Zen. And
very interesting.
And Orac was, one of the more. It was a quintessential robot, like a robotic robot, whereas Zen was the more human robot.
Right.
So that's been kind of our thesis from the get-go, how to design solutions that bring together the best of both worlds, the technology and the human aspects, and that's the name Orzacen.
Okay, fantastic. And more about, what does an AI startup do? What does it mean to be a part of an AI startup?
A lot of the things that we do, one of the things is designing custom solutions, which is the big aspects of what we do. So we do custom solutions for enterprises, custom AI solutions for enterprises. Now, why that is that was a little interesting for me as a design problem statement, and this was when I was just joining the organization a year ago. Is because I was told, while there's a lot of organizations that are trying to design AI solutions for specific context, our goal is to design an AI design system that is relevant for all different use cases.
So when you say it's a customized solution, do you design various AI algorithms or AI products for specifically for specific clients, or do you have one solution, a monolith solution, which gets exposed to different organizations based on whatever their needs are?
No, so we do. I think we do a bit of both. The big part of what we do right now, what we're focusing right now, is designing custom solutions. Meaning, enterprises come to us with their specific business problems, and then we design the solution around it.
So how is it different than the typical software as a service, or rather the software solution model which was earlier there? What's so AI specific about it?
So I think there's two aspects. There's the design aspect and there's the technology aspect.
Right.
From a technology standpoint, designing AI solutions, let's say, is a technical art. While the use cases may differ from one enterprise to another, certain standard requirements or certain standard needs still exist that all AI solutions need. Things like access control, things like observability, how are different users using the platforms. Things like security, things like data plugins. Enterprises have their data sitting in on their clouds. You can directly plug it into the solutions and bring it in for the models to learn, so on and so forth. The idea is, if you would go to like you said, the previous software as a solution organization to do that solution for you, yes, they'd still do it for you, but they charge you 3x 4x more because they need all of that time to rebuild these standard solutions.
Right.
Whereas for us, in something called as the Zen platform, we've already designed these core modules, so that whenever we get to designing a new solution, we already have those modules available to us to build around.
So when you say modules are already available, so this is a library of modules that you have developed over the years, maybe for different clients, but this is a property, an intellectual property that your organization owns.
Exactly.
And does different kind of companies would mean that when you serve different clients, you're essentially creating different models for them that will be trained, and those models will be then owned by you or by them?
No, it's owned by them because they're the ones who are paying for the solution, so to speak. But I think it's also not a lot of training the model per se, but leveraging different models to develop the workflows.
Okay.
So while let's say something like a chat GPT is a single to and fro chatbot AI, you ask a question, it comes back with a response. Whereas, just to give an example of a solution that we developed a highly customized invoice extraction solution for a large diamond trader in India who had a lot of these small manual invoices that they had different accountants actually sitting in front of computers pushing into the system. So the solution we designed for them would take in the scanned copies of these invoices, and then it would process them through this AI workflow to actually get the contents pushed into their accounting system.
Right.
Now, why we focus a lot on this word workflow is because if you would push that same invoice to a chat GPT, it would still give you an Excel file with the contents.
Right.
But what we do is we also sit and we align it with their existing accounting system. They have expenses marked as okay, this is a C1 type of invoice, this is C2. So we kind of do that mapping as well.
So in a way, what you are doing with AI is assumption is most of the organizations already have some sort of systems in silos available.
Exactly.
You're trying to connect the silos together.
Exactly.
And you are trying to make these systems become more intelligent because of the input that is being extracted or created out of you.
100%. So while something like a chat GPT, the general purpose AI, what we try and do is add that enterprise context into the loop. So now it works for your organization, for your context, for your use case.
Fantastic. So that means AI is useful, but it still leaves space and places for customized solution makers.
100%. 100%. I mean, I think one of the interesting things that I've kind of realized about AI is that it will never be 100% correct, by the way. It can be 99% correct. We keep pushing the boundaries. It can be 99.999999%. We'll never get to a stage where it's 100% accurate.
But then 100% accurate is not, even humans are not 100% accurate, right?
Exactly the point. So in some ways, I think the errors of AI today are it's sort of copying the errors of humans that we've
The
our
biases that we
behavior.
have.
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic. It's interesting that you mentioned that you're working for this AI startup and you are in the role of design. From the little bit of knowledge that I have seen in terms of the utilization of AI, I think two areas have gotten impacted very, very quickly in workforce. One is the creatives that people are able to design, and also the video. So now, as a designer, do you see that AI is going to impact the job of a designer, a graphic designer, or an instructional designer, or a videographer, or video editor? Do you expect that to happen? That AI is going to have a massive impact there?
100%. I think, see, there's one of the things I've kind of realized about design over the last couple of years is, which is true to all other aspects as well, all other jobs as well, is within design, there's the craft aspect, understanding how to execute things well, understanding how to take a photograph well, clip together a video very well, do an extremely nice detailed graphic very well. That's the craft of design. And then there's the design, the thinking aspect, the design thinking as we call it. So yes, with the advent of AI, increasingly, people will find it's easier to get high quality deliverables. The craft aspect is going to become more accessible. Increasingly, more and more people will find it easy to do highly finished work. But that only means that there's going to be more emphasis on the thinking aspect. So certainly, I think big times of change with AI and design, and people will have to start really focusing, like I said, on the thinking aspect, and figuring out how to really best leverage these tools. Now that they have increased efficiency by their side to create more stuff, as they say, finding the signal within the noise that design thinking really helps with is going to increasingly become more important moving forward.
So what it means is the people who are very good at design will continue to be employed. They will still have relevance in the times to come. But the newcomers, or the essentially the bodies, that software tools, their number will be reduced.
100%. I think, as anyways, this is the future of education podcast. So I'm sure we get to touch upon this aspect as well. But that's one of the things, I'd certainly like to talk about more through this is, in some ways, design is going to become increasingly more important. Even people who are non-designers, people who are software people, folks, or so on and so forth. Increasingly, for everyone, it's going to become more important to focus on the critical thinking aspects of their job profiles.
Right.
So
the mundane will be done by AI.
Exactly.
But the specific and the expertise will come from humans.
Exactly. The craft is going to be done by the AI, but the thinking is still going to be driven by the human. And that's why I think, like I said, we'll touch more upon this, but design thinking is going to become extremely important for education.
So I do know, the fact that I think you're going to be such a fantastic speaker on this topic is because as I've seen you grow as a kid, and I've known that you have those very interesting aspects about your personality, which make you stand apart from all your peers. One of those is that you're a Guinness World Record holder. So, it's not been, I've done 4 or 5 episodes of this podcast. None of the people who have sat here has a Guinness World Record. So why don't you talk a little bit about what that was?
So yeah, it's an interesting story. I'll try and keep it short, but I've been a big board game lover. I did my undergrad from Bangalore, and there is a board game cafe in Bangalore that me and a couple of my friends used to visit often. And we used to visit so often that we were on good terms with the owner, etc. And the owner there wanted to get a mural, some paint mural done for his cafe, because I knew that we all came from art and design background. So he said, "Okay, can you guys do something for me?" And yeah, being the the large thinking person that I am, I was like, hey, we have to do something more on theme for you. So instead of a simple a paint mural, why don't we do something like a dice mosaic for you, because you're a board game cafe, and doing an artwork out of dice would be something on theme for you. I said, okay, yeah, that sounds great. And then I think somehow organically the next step my mind traveled to was, okay, if we are doing an extremely large size dice mosaic, well, let me just give a quick check. What's the Guinness World Record for the largest dice mosaic? And at that point, that was something like a 75 or 80 square feet large dice mosaic, and I was like, I think yeah, this is beatable. So we put together a plan, on how to build it. We did some costing calculation, some budgeting around the money that we need to put it together. Now at that point, the board game, owner, that cafe's owner, he wasn't willing to invest as much into the mural, but we were fully invested into the idea. So we started talking to other people, and finally, we found partners in the Bangalore International Airport organization. So we went ahead, we spent a good, 7-8 months building it. In fact, half the money was contributed by Bangalore Airport, but the other half we crowdfunded and raised from friends, families, so on and so forth, our networks. And yeah, it took us some good 7-8 months, but we built the largest dice mosaic in the world. It's now currently hosted on the, I think, our domestic arrival hall at the Bangalore airport. And yeah, if you all ever...
What does it look like? What is the mosaic?
So it's an illustration of Ramanujan, because it was Bangalore airport. We wanted to do something that's slightly on theme with India.
Karnataka.
Yeah, and so it's called The Man Who Knew Infinity.
Oh, fantastic.
Who Ramanujan was known for. And that's what the mosaic is. It's a portrait illustration of Ramanujan.
Fantastic. So all the people who are watching this podcast, whenever you go to the Bangalore airport, at the arrivals, you will see a phenomenal dice mosaic made by Nitish and his team and his friends, which is also the largest mosaic in its category, made out of dice, which says "The Man Who Knew Infinity." So whenever you go there, please check it out. And I've personally seen it. It looks phenomenal and fantastic. Nitish, you have studied both in UK, United Kingdom, and India. So you have experienced the Indian education system, and you have experienced the European education system, or the British education system. There are a lot of people who watch this podcast are coming from school education segment. There would be parents, there would be teachers, there is students also who will be watching this. So any comparisons that you can make? Some of these will probably at some point of time decide if they want to study abroad or if they want to study in India.
So I think it's interesting. I had this exact same conversation with one of my undergrad professors. He spent most of his life and education in India, and he was of course a professor at our university in Bangalore. So he was also extremely well ingrained with design education in India, and then he went on to Stockholm to pursue his PhD, and now he's a professor in the Aalto University.
Oh, fantastic!
So he's also he has got extremely great exposure of design education in Europe. And we had this conversation about exactly on the exact same question, because I also come from, as a student, I did my undergrad from India, and like you said, master's from UK. Now, one of the clear patterns both of us observed, and it has nothing to do with something being good or bad, but rather, the strengths of both, is that the level of rigor in India is incomparable. Like if you go through an Indian educational institute, the amount of hard work they ingrain in you, or the amount of focus they push you.
That's true for design schools.
That's what we found for design schools, at least. The amount of research these designers were doing in India, the amount of interviews they were doing, they were extremely thorough about their work, about the craft, right? Whereas in UK and Europe, they are extremely good with working with, how shall I put it, with the unknown, with the... So there I found that the institutes were not prescriptive at all. Like in every class, even if it was a class of 10, 15, 20 students, all the professors are constantly trying to personalize the curriculum for you. They're trying to understand what is it that you're interested in, what are your strengths, and how do I, give you projects and assignments that further hone that.
Right.
So now why I say that none of these are bad is because in real life, when we go ahead and do any project, I think both of these aspects are equally important. You need a good balance of, extremely hard work, focus, and execution. But you also need people within that team, who work well with the unknown flexibly.
So when you say the European design education works better with the unknown, does it not have rigor, or vice versa? Indian design education doesn't allow you, or by design doesn't allow you to work with the unknown.
See, Hayes, I think I still have to do a little bit more thinking on that question. But so far, my answer is this: because that system is trying to constantly personalize, the assignments and projects and your educational learning path for you. It's unable to make your assignments as detailed and your deliverables as defined. So while your assignments will be highly personalized with you, no one will be there to constantly guide you and teach you rather on how to do extremely detailed work within that area.
Right. Fantastic. So I think we have covered the first part of the podcast, which is you and your background. I think we are now moving to the second part of the podcast, which essentially is the name of the podcast also, the future of education. Here, a very pointed question that I have for you, because of your background, is how do you imagine the role of design shaping the way we learn in the next decade? Do you think design has a interesting or a major role to play in how we learn in the times to come?
Fine question. I think that's what I was, we had started talking about that earlier. I think, and that's like how I was framing it earlier as well. In all vocations, in all jobs, in all areas of work, there's always two aspects. There's the critical aspect, the thinking aspect, and then there's the craft of it.
Right.
Increasingly, everyone will find that the craft will become easier to do. Right? If you're spending a lot of time honing the craft, it has benefits. There's no doubt that we can spend another hour just talking about the importance of being good at craft. But increasingly, people will find that design and the thinking aspect, the critical aspects, are going to become more important. And just to take the example of software design, so to speak, right now, and perhaps even in my own organization, the AI solutions that we build, because developing, coding is so on and so forth, doing PPTs, everything can be done by some form of AI solution, AI tool. What is just increasingly becoming more important is people who are smart enough, who can guide that AI, who are constantly, who are not just pushing out, to the masses whatever it is that the ChatGPT is generating for you, but it's constantly trying to guide the AI, trying to focus on those design aspects. What is it meant for? Who are our users? What are we designing? So one of my takeaways is certainly that in education in general, today there is a lot of time that is spent on teaching craft to kids. Increasingly, we'll find that at least that's the direction I feel education needs to move to, is how do we spend more and more time on the critical aspects.
There's a question here, maybe from so for example, in normal workforce, normal environments, what happens is, let's assume somebody joins an organization, they are at at the first line of defense. So they talk to customers, they probably build something, they try to do a lot of level 1 task. So what happens is, when somebody is doing that for a certain number of years, they become good at that. Then they move on to level 2, then they move on to level 3. And finally, for example, what happens is you can differentiate between an average work output and a excellent work output because of the multidimensional experience you've had over the years. So you're saying that we want to make sure but that is only possible if you go through the path of learning all those crafts. Now, if you're saying that if you're not going to focus on crafts and not going to spend too much time on these crafts because a machine can generate these crafts for you, how would you actually have the discernment or the nuance to differentiate between an average craft and a better craft? It's like, you need to smell, for example, I can take example in any domain, whether it's a shoemaker Somebody who has gone through the process of making a shoe would understand what leather is going to work better, what leather is going to, how a leather is going to perform in rough weather conditions, but good weather conditions, Indian climate, outside climate. So it's like, if you go through the craft, only then you become good at evaluating craft.
Right. So here's my take on that. It's not necessarily about eliminating the craft from the learning experience, rather about focusing more on what is your takeaway, how are you thinking when you're doing something. Now in education there is a popular theory of constructionism. So I think our audience definitely would know this platform called Scratch, which
Yeah.
everyone who's watching this right now would know about it.
Or Avishkaar Maker Studio.
Or Avishkaar Maker Studio as well, which is another great platform to design games on. But so I'm just going to still touch a little bit upon Scratch because it's a legendary product. I mean,
it is.
Let's not take away from that. And it was designed by this MIT Play group, which started this entire movement, a global movement of creative technology education, back in 70s, 80s. So that guy interestingly wrote this entire theory of constructionism, which talks about objects to think with. Now, what this concept of objects to think with talks about is, it says that whenever you're doing something, it's not necessarily about what that teaches you, but about how do you use that as a model to learn something else.
Right.
So just to give an example, one of the examples he wrote this book called The Mindstorm. I think I've shared that book with you, right? And in that book, he talks about how he used to love playing with gears as a child.
Right.
And he said that, understanding how gears work, what is a 1:2 ratio for gears, so on and so forth. It was never about understanding gears itself, but later in life, how did I use that knowledge to learn something else?
He was probably talking about mathematics, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is assimilative thinking and analytical thinking. How do you use what you're doing and use that knowledge and experience to learn something else?
Right.
So that's kind of what I'm talking about. I think so far a lot of our education, and again all the more in the context of India, education and curriculums have been extremely craft focused. You learn this and this is all you need to understand from it. How do we bring in those analytical aspects so that while kids are learning craft, or anyone even at an undergrad or postgrad level, while they're learning all of those crafts, we hone their analytical skills so they understand larger aspects of whatever it is that they're doing.
So the fact that you are talking about, we have to focus on the craft and also how to intelligently tell me, so if I could articulate it properly, one is in our education system. So in our education system, what is a new thing that we need to add, given that AI is going to play such an important role, and a lot of menial and mundane work will be done by algorithms? What is the fundamental shift that we need to make in the education system so that we are training a generation which can be successful in those times?
Great question. I think great question. And in some ways, one of the things that creative technology education tries to do is ingrain this idea, or rather this method of iterative and systemic thinking.
Okay.
And also iterative and systemic working. Now, while in the last 50 years of, ever since we started thinking about teaching technology skills to kids, it's always been about learn a language or build a robot, all been about the craft. But there's a bigger thing at play here, which is the fact that solutions are built iteratively. When you have a problem in front of you, you build a small solution. It performs, let's say, it solves 10% of the problem and does not solve the remaining 90%. But then, trying it out helps you understand what is the next step you need to take, and then the next step, and then the next step. And that essentially is iterative thinking. Systemic thinking, on the other hand, talks about how you solve problems as a system and not as a silo in isolation. Now, why I'm talking about iterative and systemic thinking is, again, it just goes back to the fact that when we have all of these AI solutions that will help us create things very quickly, become very extremely efficient at the craft, focusing more on the iterative aspect and iterative methods of working is going to become important. That is what education needs to be about. It's not about, okay, how do you make an extremely good drawing or how do you write a piece of code, but the fact that once you've written that first piece of code, how do you make it better? What is the next step you need to get on to?
Right.
So that's yeah.
So in that sense, if I could, borrow a parallel from what we do at Avishkar, so the Avishkar leagues, where you give complex problem statements for children to solve, are a very critical aspect of the education system.
Right, 100%. And it's not even about the problem statement itself. It's about the method of how do you solve that problem, right? So technology education has always been, or rather, all of the engineers of the world have always been very good at it. This idea of iterative thinking. Anyone out there who has written any piece of code knows, or rather, put together any electronics or try to build a robot, they know that it never works in the first go.
Right.
That's something, and there's a lot that it does not do. Right. And so engineers of the world are extremely good at iterative progress and iterative making. What I'm trying to say is now all of these other people in these other vocations also need to kind of understand how to do that.
Okay. We used to make, we had this funny thing when we were working as computer science engineers. If your piece of code works for the first time, then you necessarily know that, something is wrong, and it's nothing but a bunch of printf statements. So that, I think, is a truism for the world. Again, a plug-in here for Avishkar, but what I feel is, what you are saying is, the ability to the ability to think in a systemic manner. Because when you're building a robot, you're actually thinking in a systemic manner. You're thinking about the mechanical construction. You're thinking about the software code that goes into it, and then maybe sometimes you're also thinking about what is the electronics you're utilizing. Right. And and you build each of these independent systems separately, then you bring them together and you solve the problem statement. Right. So this is something which you believe should be then like mainstreamed across the schools of the country?
100%. Yeah, in fact, I kind of did not touch upon that thoroughly, but you are right. So one of the failures of education today is, let's take the example of robotics itself, learning how to build robots. Now, one way is to say, give an assignment to a child saying, build a car that has 4 wheels and can go forward. And that's an extremely straightforward method of learning and designing things. The other is what you're saying, problem-based approach, project-based approach, whereas you need to get from point A to point B. Here are some things that you can use to do that, and go ahead and design the solution. So that's essentially what, like you've been saying, you are trying to do through the Avishkar League, but it also has an implication on education in general. This problem-oriented approach is what is really needed. So you expose students to goals and let's take back. So you expose students to goals they are trying to accomplish, and then you give them access to a bunch of tools that they can use to design their solution. And then you train them how to systematically think about designing the solution, how to iteratively think about designing the solution and get there.
I could have asked this question in a different way also, but I'm going to still ask. You did robotics. You were our league champion, I think, for 2012, if I'm not wrong. What is that, the experience of participating in the leagues? What has that helped you in now the fact that you are leading, you are in a leading position or a senior position or leadership position in an AI organization? Has that helped? Has that helped you to navigate in this new world?
100%. I think, some of these things, it's hard to understand the value of them when you're going through it. So as I think I was about a 12 or 13-year-old when me and our team became the Avishkar League champion. This was back in 2012, I think. Yeah, damn, long time ago. But so yeah, I think back then, and in fact, funny thing is, it took me a good 5 years to get to that stage. And the first time I participated, I was maybe somewhere down the leaderboard, and eventually we got better at it. But I think the interesting thing I find about Avishkar League is there's a mix of good different types of contests. While there is the IRC league, which is more quantitative, there's the things like Makeathon, and even within the IRC league, there are prizes for the most creative solution, the most out of the box solutions. And then finally, the grand champion becomes as they're calculated based on the mix of all of these scores. And for us, and back in 2012, what added as the biggest score was this creative thinking award, which I'm kind of missing out on the specific name of. But it was the fact that our solution wasn't the most quantifiably efficient solution, but it was the most out of the box solution. And I think participating in Avishkaar League over and over, over the span of a couple of years, that kind of helped us. For us, the goal was to become champions. And the way we were iteratively and systematically thinking about it is, okay, how do we attack this thing from different directions? Maybe we are not the best at building quantified solutions. Maybe we'll try and build out of the box solutions. So yeah, 100%. I think the Avishkaar League is great like that. And in retrospect, I can say all of these things that I still carry in my professional journey today with any project that I take on.
So that did have an impact on how a systemic thinking was ingrained during that process itself. Exactly. Maybe during that time you were not able to realize it, but now looking back, you can connect the dots.
Exactly.
Very happy to hear that. So Nitish, in your experience, how do you think? See, one of the problems with our education system, I think it's problem with the Indian education system and a lot of education systems abroad as well, is we are always judging or we are always motivating children to comply, and then we are assessing them on that compliance. We are never breaking whenever creating an open play field for them to think. So where curiosity and intrinsic motivation take center stage. So the fact that do you think design has a role to play there, where design can fundamentally alter the parameters for children to learn and be more focused on intrinsic motivation and curiosity, and not worry about compliance and assessment?
100%. I think let's break it down into the two keywords you used here. One is curiosity and motivation.
Intrinsic motivation, yeah.
Intrinsic motivation, right? So far, I think what you're also talking and saying is that our current educational system and the way we design curriculum, it's prescriptive. We reward compliance.
Yes.
Going back to that robotics example, build a car with 4 wheels and you get a reward. So certainly this kind of goes back to building systems which are more project oriented and problem oriented. And I'll kind of talk a little bit more about how that helps with curiosity and motivation both. Now, first is when you give that kind of a large problem statement to a child and you ask them to come up with the solutions by themselves, they keep doing that over time again and again. That's where curiosity comes from, because they try something to get to a certain endpoint, they fail at it, they try something else, and that's how that innate curiosity is ingrained in anyone, in a child or anyone in any vocation, right? Then comes the motivation aspect, which is I was asked to achieve something. I came up with a solution out of the blue, from my mind. Now, when I'm trying to actually execute on that solution, that's where motivation comes from. I'm not doing something that someone else asked me to do. This was an idea that, I originally came up with. And that's how that motivation to do things well on their craft, that's also, how these two aspects go hand in hand.
So in a way, what you're suggesting is if we make the learner responsible for their own learning, then it allows them to be more, the motivation stems from that.
Exactly.
And how do you use design to make that happen? So you are essentially, so you change the methodology from instruction to project based.
Exactly. See, design thinking in some ways is a lot, but is also not too complex. Some of these simple aspects of iterative thinking, systemic thinking is also what design thinking and design as a process is about, right?
But I feel, I still, so of late I've not interacted much with parents, but whenever I have interacted with parents, I don't know, maybe in India we have this fixation towards, committing to facts, or focus on fact-based learning, like all the tables, the dates, the incidents, the events in history, or the tables in mathematics, right? A part of me used to first completely discard that, but now I have started to even appreciate that. In a world where everything is being done with technology, the ability to memorize something, see, at the end of the day, your brain is also a muscle, right? The more you use it, the better it becomes. So even if you start learning some facts, it's actually useful for you. So I'm in my minds, I'm now confused, where you are saying that let's turn everything into a project-based learning experience. So memorizing facts, learning facts, does that part of education has any role to play now?
No, I think I may in fact have a beautiful answer to that, by the way. So I myself, by the way, also learn a lot of things. I can still, even though I have nothing to do with chemistry in my job, I know the first 30 elements of the periodic table by heart. And that's just something I know. Now, the idea is, memorizing things by itself is not bad. The challenge with how we go about rote learning in education today is, again, it's extremely prescriptive. Learn this, and I'm not going to tell you why you need to learn it. I still learn a lot of things, in my everyday life or my professional life or whatever it is that I'm trying to do. But all of my motivation comes from what I'm trying to accomplish. I am very clear about why I am learning that.
But then, that's an age. There's an age for that. So, for example, would you teach a tiny tot? You need to learn mathematics or you need to learn these tables because it will, possibly enhance your brain muscle. I mean, even if that's the case, even if we tell a child, I don't think they will be motivated by that.
No, so I think of course the idea is not to, like you say a lot, is to swing to the opposite side of the pendulum extremely. But of course there's, find a bit of balance there. But what I'm trying to say is today there is, if I look at least back, from my own experiences of school and my own schooling, I saw no project-based learning at all. Everything that I learned I was just asked to learn, right?
So you saying that a balance is required?
Exactly.
So maybe 20% memorizing to the facts, 80% project, or 50-50,
exactly.
or 80-20?
Or maybe that evolves through time. Maybe, in grade 1 it's 70 or 30 and eventually,
okay.
but that evolution that needs to take place.
Yeah, fantastic. Nitish, you do know that, electronic education or a computer-based screen education, phone screen education is going to be a reality now, right? Not completely, but some form of it is a reality. What can design do to ensure that we make it more empathetic and joyful and possibly addictive also?
I think, see, more than design per se, or rather, let me take a step back and put it this way. So, when we talk about inculcating design thinking and the design process into education and into learning, any form of skill, one of the very core aspects to that design process is just talking to a lot of people and working with, a lot of different individuals. So interestingly, I remember because I came from that technology background, and while I did, work a lot in teams growing up, again in Avishkaar League and all of these competitions, I was reasonably one of those individuals who always liked to work alone. And to the point that, I would, if I was working with someone and it seemed like my opinion was not sort of, getting accepted, I'd make up fights and leave the room. So I remember in the first year of my undergrad, I was put in one such group project. And then one of the people in that group project was someone who I, hated with all my, with all the cells in my body. And I just knew that something, would go down, which did, by the way. But I think the beauty of that process is I also kind of came to my senses and realized, okay, I have to find a way to make it work with him because you have to deliver something.
Right.
So that's kind of, I think, the beauty of that forceful process of just putting people together,
Okay.
even if someone is, not naturally an extrovert or not comfortable working a lot with others. But as we increasingly bring in, design thinking and that idea of go out there, talk to the users, talk to different people, gain inputs, work with a lot of different people, that kind of, in a very subtle way, it brings joy to that idea of empathy, or to the idea of, okay, there's joy in working with someone, there's joy in learning from someone.
So how do you then, so what you are saying is when you are designing the electronic interfaces, the process of designing the electronics interfaces should be collaborative. It should have a child who, as a co-creator, a teacher as a co-creator, and a software engineer as a co-creator, or a product manager as a co-creator. So all of them have to come together. And do you think it will also depend upon what age groups we are working for? I mean, right now, the cookie cutter approach is if it's young kids, you mostly do with animation, nursery rhymes, good music, and blah blah blah. But once you move towards older kids, the interfaces tend to be more bland.
So see, I think more than the interfaces themselves, or let me put it this way, the artifacts of learning. It's about the learning approach, more than having individual projects, force group projects, or at least have a good balance of individual and group projects.
So you're saying that the electronic interface is just one of the tools, and you have to merge this tool in a way with the overall other aspects.
Exactly.
Where so it's the tool will not be able to bring in joy or intuitiveness, but the way the tool is brought into the overall scheme of things can do that.
Exactly.
Can deliver that.
100%. And also, so two aspects, of course, the tool then can be reverse engineered. Once you know that, okay, we are trying to design the tool for a curriculum that has a lot of team projects. You can always reverse engineer and design the tool like that. But like I said, the second aspect is the kind of problem statements that you pitch and the projects you pitch to these kids. Make sure there's a lot of talking to the user, talking to empathy, and talk to whoever it is that you're designing for. Right. So just design thinking by itself, imbibing design thinking in education is just what is going to bring in the empathy.
Fantastic. My next question is, think hard about it. That what is one idea about the future of education that either excites you or scares you the most?
So, I think what excites me is highly conceptual and dreamy, and what scares me is very practically. So I remember there's this, I watch a lot of movies, and I think that's a shared love that we have. So there's this recent movie that came out. It's called Megalopolis. It's by Francis Ford Coppola. If you've seen,
no, I've not.
Right? Although the movie by itself wasn't too great, but it talks about a utopia where where there's a society of individuals who are doing a lot of creative things. There are a lot of these magical materials they are working with. Now, one of the scenes in that movie, it shows a young, community of kids that are working with this extremely flexible and magical material, and they're all working in extremely creative ways, and they're creating, great designs and great products. So that's what excites me about education. I think with the advent of AI, like we spoke about earlier, doing things is going to become easy, right? So now we have that material to actually bring our ideas to life. So that's what excites me. I think now we have an opportunity to increasingly pitch more and more complex problems to younger kids, because they have the tools to bring a lot of their crazy ideas to life. What scares me is that I think where we are today, how far behind education is compared to even where we are today, and how far into the future now technology is taking us.
Right.
I think that bridge is going to even further, become even more wide.
Right.
And also, challenges of India. So I was just reading this news the other day. CBSE has introduced some AI curriculum in some 18,000 government schools. that don't even have computers.
Yeah. I mean, I've looked at the curriculum, honestly speaking, it's very theoretical in nature. So there is no practicality to the curriculum. But anyways, that's a different story. So you're saying that the advent of technology or advent of AI is going to further, further deepen the gap between,
Exactly.
what education is. So any which ways we are laggards, we're behind, and the technology will just ensure that this gap is further broadened.
Exactly. I mean, if education doesn't catch up soon, increasingly what kids are going to find is, as soon as they're out of school or college or their post grads, that whatever they've been learning is no longer useful, because the ways of creating things in the real world have
Absolutely changed. And I think that's where I think people like us, Avishkar, makes a lot of sense.
100%.
Where we are, by the way we are, the way we are throwing real life problems at the schools, at the children, they are able to. Okay, fantastic. Nitish, I'm now moving into the next rapid fire question or rapid fire round of this podcast. I call it as no, it depends or balance questions.
Okay.
So you need to give me one way or the other. Okay.
Okay.
A Wally world where technology is controlling all our lives, or a world devoid of technology. Pick one and why.
I think I'd pick a world devoid of technology, and I have a slightly philosophical take on this. And this is also coming from the fact that the Wall-E technology dystopia it is a little consumerist in nature, and all consuming people are just disconnected from each other. So if I have to pick between that and a world that perhaps had no technology, right?
Right.
I still pick that, because even outside of technology, I think our planet Earth has a lot of rich opportunities to learn and explore. Even before electricity, there was a lot of creativity and art and culture
Right.
that happened and transpired. So yeah, I think that's the philosopher in me saying that. But I could live in a world without technology. But as opposed to living in a world where technology just ends up consuming you completely.
Yeah, consuming you completely. Fantastic. Second rapid fire question is: humans will be irrelevant due to advent of AI, or AI is just another chapter in the technological advancement witnessed by humans?
I AI is another chapter. Well, let me answer that question this way. I think humans are also smart enough. Because we are the creator of things, of course, we'll never create something that makes us irrelevant. I think as a group, as a society, we are sensible and selfish enough to never design things that makes us irrelevant.
But honestly speaking, it's not the society doesn't create things collaboratively. What happens is, in most of the advancements you would see, is it's the 2-3% of the world which is actually creating, and the remaining 95% or 97% is consuming. So maybe the fact that you are putting in so much intelligence into AI, that it benefits those 2 to 3%, but it ends up wreaking havoc on the remaining 95%.
It will be a challenge, I think, and when you put it that way, it will be a challenge. I think the times that are coming ahead of us, some parts of it will be scary. Change is always scary, and whenever I think the funny thing about humans, I believe, is whenever we are given these massively powerful gifts, it takes us a little while to understand how to use them, how to work with them.
Yeah.
Take any example from history, weapons or electricity, so on and so forth, right? Whenever we get something that is just massively forward-looking and technologically advanced, I think there's also a lot of bad side effects that come out of it. It takes us a little while to sort of wrap our heads around it and make our peace with it, get to a sensible stage with it. So I think that's what's going to happen with AI. Yes, we don't have all the answers right now, and then a lot of what we do know, at least at a systemic level, if anyone is saying it's not going to, just shake up our system entirely, it is possibly lying to themselves and to everyone else around them. So tough times are ahead, but yeah, I mean, fundamentally we are all builders and optimists. To
Fantastic. On that note, I would call it an end of the podcast. But before we, call it a day, just one last question. You can probably answer a question that I did not ask. So this is something where I feel that, in case if I missed out on asking some question which could have unraveled or uncovered some wisdom, which you feel, people watching this podcast, people watching the future of education should know. You could ask that question to yourself.
Now, sure, I think one of the things that I've kind of realized, with my own journey is, even though all of the systems around me were extremely prescriptive in nature, I kind of always navigated my own way through it. I decided what it was that I wanted and needed to learn at any given stage in my life, and at this point, my learning approach is extremely reverse oriented. What is it that I'm trying to achieve, and how, what are the things that I need to learn to get there? So I think whilst there's a lot of talk about AI in education and, is AI going to, what role is AI going to play in education? I think the biggest way AI can potentially evolve education is by making it personalized. So that's kind of how you leverage AI for education. Enabling kids to, increasingly find their own journey that they want to take through their lives. So that's my hope for, the future of AI in education, that it enables more and more people to understand that identities don't exist in boxes and silos. Identities are a grand mix of a lot of different colors.
Right.
And I hope AI can help a lot of young builders get there.
Fantastic. This is something which I have heard, which is common across innovators across the centuries. There's a term called autodidacts, which essentially means people teach themselves what they want to learn. Thank you very much, Nitish. It was an absolute pleasure and honor to have you here. I wish you best of luck in life and keep on creating the future of everything, not just education. Thank you.
Thank you so much.